Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to another very exciting panel at the Indegene Digital Summit this year. And this time it's about a topic that I'm personally very, very passionate about. And the ones who've been following us know that I pretty much moderated a panel on the topic of content every year. And I've been observing the topic of content gets more and more sophisticated. Today it's about automation of content to drive personalization at scale. Modular content has been a topic we've been discussing. It's been discussed in the industry for a while as a tool for reuse and easy authoring, especially emails and even some other assets. But now the pandemic has accelerated a move toward hyper-personalization and doing that at scale across the industry. So the focus on modular content shifted away from just being a reuse tool to say, okay, how can I actually use it as an approach to automate the content supply chain and use modular content as a catalyst, not only to drive the personalization, but maybe have an impact on the entire commercial model as you're able to do that. So I have a very distinguished panel here that has unique experience in the journey of this and most recently achievements in automation of content. Starting with Tara Stewart, who's until very recently been the Vice President of Worldwide Engagement Planning Content Capabilities at BMS. Cecil Lee, who's the Lead Content Strategy Advisor and the Content Intelligence Team at Eli Lilly. Michael Kerr, who's the Global Head of the Go-to-Market Services at Boehringer Ingelheim. And Parker Richardson, who just recently joined Astellas as the VP of Omnichannel Operations. Welcome, very proud and happy to be here with you. And why don't I start off right away with a question for Parker. Parker, how is, in your opinion, content modularization been misdirecting the marketers and the organizations into thinking that modular content is about aesthetics, shapes, colors, layouts, rather than designing tailored messages?
Well, thank you, Mark, first of all, for having me. I appreciate it. I'm getting told that my bandwidth is also very low on my computer, so hopefully that will pass. So if you lose me, trust you got plenty of other voices to jump in. Yeah, the question is an interesting one, and I think it all really starts with how we define and talk about modular as a starting place. And also when we think about scalable content and whether it's global to local or whatever you're sort of working with inside your company, the idea that we need to personalize content, I think we need to be really critical with ourselves, not just in operations, but also at the marketer level around, what is actually going to drive increased engagement. If I move a purple square from the upper left to the bottom right, or if I change a triangle into a diamond, do I get any increased engagement? Probably most obviously the answer is going to be no. So when we think about modular content, what I like to do a lot of times is try to help rephrase or reframe the discussion that we're not modularly designing artistic and creative concepts. We should be modularly designing the words that we use to bring messages to life. And so content, if we break that down further, is not about a channel. It's not about an email. It's not about a web page. Content is about the message I'm bringing to personalize something for an intended audience. And so it's not about aesthetics as so much as you say, or it shouldn't be. I suppose it could be, but in my mind, I see modular content far more about the modularity of the words and the message than I do the aesthetic. So I think it can fool us, and it's really great as an organization to really align on what you mean by that as you operationalize that.
Very good. So, Tara, when you've been on this journey for quite some time, you've seen that you're as passionate about this topic and obviously many others, but this one as I am. So what are the achievements and roadblocks when you go through this journey and when you actually start to shift toward automation rather than just content operations in the traditional sense?
Well, and I think Parker highlighted a piece of it, right? So one of the challenges is making sure that the organization is aligned on what it is and what it isn't, right? I think some of the other roadblocks or mindsets, if you will, and you and I have had the luxury of talking about this as well, is it does change the supply chain from start to finish, right? It starts with your engagement planning. It starts with understanding the segmentation, because in order to personalize your messaging, you need to understand those aspects to be able to do it successfully. I think the other piece is it also is critical to realize it's a learning journey, right? It's not always going to be 100% perfect. There's going to be lessons along the way. And you really have to set the organization's mindset and culture to realize you'll get there, right? And it will improve. But there's going to be learnings along the way. And I don't mean in the context of having uncompliant content. That's not what I'm talking about, right? But, it might not be the exact message, because you have to refine the data. You have to refine what's being served. And that is the learning aspects of this. In terms of successes, to be honest, we've seen a number of things. One is better engagement, right? Because you're actually being more relevant and more timely with the actual individuals that you're engaging with. We've had the luxury through many of our experiences seeing a lift, right, in script volume and revenue generation as a result of that. And again, it goes back to relevancy. If the more relevant that we are, the more accurate and timely it helps people with the information they need at that given time. And I would say the third that we've seen after the learning, right, because as people were changing roles or changing how they went about things, was really speed. I would say the hardest challenge that we still have in industry and in my experience is moving from that tactical mindset to true publishing mindset, right? There's plenty of industries that publish content every day, real time, 24/7. And maybe I have the luxury because I came from some of those industries, but we really need to shift the mindset as a whole. And I think with that comes shift in roles and responsibilities, shift in how you distribute content, if you will, and then automation will actually get better and better.
Oh, very good. And again, I want to invite the panel members to comment on your colleagues who want to add something, and that will be good. I'm going to weave some audience questions into the discussion as well. Before I do that, though, Cecil, you guys made at Lilly a big decision some time ago to make some radical changes, and you've got a lot of successes since. How are you transforming modular content for automation and personalization across more than just email?
Certainly. So I'd like to share a little bit about our journey, but I cannot help but resonate with one of the terms that Tara was saying is mindset change. I really felt like the whole journey that we were doing is changing the mindset of people, that we're doing something very, very different. And how we started it is we need to have a very good vision on where we're heading. We need to bring people along. And also we need to take a hard look at our current state. Because if we don't do that, we don't know the from and to picture very well. And last but not least is, what are we actually going to do about it? And so we actually are still driving that transformation initiative. With this scale, we need to have certainly important sponsorship by our company's senior leadership, because I think that will help a lot on change management. But it's also it's a huge cannot underestimate the huge transformation effort that everyone is impacted, and all levels of processes are impacted. And we also are implementing a new content ecosystem that supports automation and also the creation of content in a modular way. And so maybe I'd like to share a little bit more about some of the big rocks that we had, and also what we actually do about it. Maybe that will help. And so we took a hard look, on our how our content operating model is, and then are we sufficiently ready to implement the personalized content that supports this omni-channel orchestration. We find that our operating model was not sufficient to produce enough content to meet the needs for personalization. And so some big rocks that we face, and may resonate with the rest of the panelists. First of all, we have difficulty just finding content because content is everywhere. And also reusing content is not that easy. And then second one is that review and approval process was really long and also lots of effort. And in a highly regulated environment, this is very true. And the last thing I like to echo is the mindset, is the document. We're still actually living in a lot of document per document type of mindset. But in order to shift from that document mindset, you really need to think modularly. So I like to use analogy sometimes. It's like we cannot always think about building a custom car every time. We need to think about able to create an auto assembly line so that you can able to reuse content and build it to the scale that's needed by personalization. And so those are some of the big rocks that we have. And just to share a little bit more, because of those big rocks, we implemented a digital asset management system last year, where we bring all the assets together, in a way that people can find content, accelerate that type of reuse, setting up that foundation. And this year we're looking and driving more automation, leveraging, turning things that are into intelligent content, allowing the machines to do a whole lot more analysis, auto formatting, automation of building, all those things, taking advantage of the technology world that we have today. And so this is what we've been focusing. And we also pay a lot of attention to the people side of things, especially our reviewing improvers. We need to, especially the gatekeepers. So we bring them along, making sure they're supporting, on our journey. And also changing their mindset as well. Let's not focusing always reviewing the final piece that goes out. Can we think about reviewing things in a more modular way? That goes a long way. So I can certainly share more about the content, people, process, technology transformation. But I think this is a good start, to share where we're at in our journey.
No, thank you, Cecil. And we want to hear more about what your experience is now working in that automated environment in parts of your portfolio. So as it expands. Just a question on the audience I want to weave in here, since you mentioned technology as well. What role do you see, and that's a question to any one of you, what role do you see for artificial intelligence and machine learning, the role that it plays in making modular content automated?
So Mark, I can jump in. At least for us, one of the big steps we did was knowing that we had some very robust brands that had lots of tactics and lots of content, right? Where do you start? We were able to use AI and automation with the help of Indegene, but to really run those tactics and contents through, it actually came back with the modularization of that content and the first pass, if you will, at the metadata. Now, we did add to the metadata because, again, we had to align it with our corporate mindset and structure, but it helped us take some really, I will say, brands that are mid-life cycle that had robust content that didn't necessarily need to be changed, but it needed to be available so that we could customize those experiences. And it actually allowed us to prove even to the legal regulatory, because again, we did it with them, similar to Cecil, what you were highlighting, right? We can't do it by ourselves. We need to bring everybody along on the journey. So that did help us. It actually demonstrated the proof of concept, and it helped us accelerate the buy-in, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I would, Mark, if you don't mind, I'll jump in just real quick. I'll be brief on this one. I would probably almost caution in a way that maybe like tread lightly into this topic a little bit. I think, and I don't want to speak for others, but personally, when I hear the question and I hear AI and ML, I probably would guess that most people hearing that question either assume or presume that that's intended to mean AI and ML will drive modular content building and serving to the customer, right? And I think that's the point Tara is making, is there's so many ways where AI and ML can help with a piece or a part of the entirety of the operation, that, like, just be really careful that you're not really, that you're figuring out where AI and ML can help. And modular is such a, can be such a difficult and complex topic to really, operationalize, like, much less get past the theory of it, to operationalize that I would also maybe just give yourself some permission and breathing room to say, like, if you're not thinking of AI and ML yet, like it's okay. You know, like there's a runway here for you to be there. If you're ready and you're where Tara and her group were at, like that's awesome. You're really, you know, pretty far advanced on this. So I think it's just another area that like we need to learn from each other, the stories that Tara's sharing and whoever else has been there. But also don't put the pressure on yourself to be running after an AI ML solution right away if your group isn't ready for it yet either.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Parker. You know, when we work with Tara, we worked out, or they worked out the business process first, and we leverage an AI to scale, and not the AI didn't bring the solution in itself, right? It just scaled the processes. Tara, sorry.
And Parker, the other thing I would add is I would say it was the back office operations, right? That allowed us to modularize what existed, right? It did not take the place of ML. We're not at that place, or we're not at that place. You know, there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's a really fair point.
One thing that resonates with me a lot is that you are using AI ML to help, I would say, putting metadata onto the modular content rather than thinking about, you know, the content itself. And in fact, I think it's so important that for personalization, we cannot miss the data that empower the content.
Yes.
And that data
is
so important that and with the modular content, the volume of content you need to manage is so large that sometimes human is very difficult to, like, little by little to put the data on the content. And so that's where AI ML, I think, is a great opportunity to look at empowering the content with data, leveraging AI ML to identify what that is, tagging that, and that would empower a lot of the personalization journey.
Completely agree there.
May I ask a question in this context, please? Because I think this is an exciting topic to talk about, this AI piece here. I understood that it can be really powerful to come up with proper tagging for your content modules and all that, yeah? And that's clear. I think one of the critical pieces here is also to get your business rules right, to get your content and your composite assets in the end configured in a meaningful way that is still ready for approval or is approved by definition, yeah, either way. Can AI, and this is a question I don't have the answer, yeah? Can AI also help with coming up with these business rules that are enable the whole content toolkit to be ready for deployment? Any thoughts?
I think it's to be determined. At least we haven't experienced that yet. I think there's conceptually the aspiration, but organizationally, I think there's still a lot of work to do in the operations itself.
I have an iRobot-like image coming to mind, allowing AI and ML to create the business rules. But you know, aside from the doomsday sort of version of that, the closest thing I think I've had is in the way of conversation on this topic, Michael, is around, you know, if you think of a channel wireframe or template or whatever your organization calls it, like there's got to be some element of maybe what you would call logic almost built in. So, you know, how could we use AI and ML to define gatekeeping some of that logic and not allow for, you know, combinations or mixtures of things? And, you know, maybe there's an application, but I've never seen it sort of proactively or preemptively come up with those things.
Yeah, good point. Michael, since you asked a question, I'm going to ask you a question back. Since your organization plays a critical part in the content ecosystem, right, on the build part. And we talked a lot about new process, new models, new MLR processes. How does it, you know, what changes have you considered to show up the right capabilities to be then on your side to consume these content modules? And how does it impact your traditional production work stream that you have centralized? You're seeing that changing, or does it evolve?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Mark. That's a good one. As you rightly mentioned, I'm mostly accountable for the downstream part of all this content value chain. So my accountability in BI is mainly on the digital asset production. Yeah, so I'm running the global digital factory for emails, e-details, and websites. So what happens with digital asset production at scale when content is getting more and more modularized and potentially even automated, yeah. This is probably even a good question for you guys in Indegene, because you might be heavily impacted by any of these developments. But let me look into this in a little bit more detail. And here's how I see it really, and what I can observe also in BI. The journey will definitely not be quick and easy. Yeah? So what is important is to take this transformational journey one step at a time. But what does that mean? For me, that means that the primary concern for the time being is still on content planning and content development, really. Content production in this context is not the transformational catalyst. Yeah? And the way we will plan and develop content, that will have a major impact on all the downstream activities, including the creative asset package audit, the MLR that we discussed already, what Cecil elaborated, resonated really well with me. And then finally, the production and the deployment. But all these are results of a fundamental change, as I mentioned, in the planning and the development of the content. And I would like to call this end-to-end the content architecture with business rules that we were discussing already at the very heart of making this work. And what I can see is that even when content modules are pre-approved and business rules are established, the MLR on the composite asset is still requested the traditional way. I would be curious to learn from you guys and your experiences, yeah, but this is what I'm observing. The MLR colleagues are still traditional in their approach. Yeah? So initially, there will be not too much of change in this front. This will certainly take a little more time. And I think the key here will be to increase the comfort level, for example, by comparing the content modules and the business rules with the final assets, and to make sure that whatever will be the composite asset finally, that this is good for approval. Yeah? So that you have a comparison here to really drive the comfort. And a little similar to this, I don't see much change in the short term when it comes to content production. We will still receive our creative asset packages of the composite asset, and that needs to go through MLR. And MLR will continue to have their change requests, their demands, and we will work on it. And then it will go through approval again. And then it's the traditional creative asset package that we are just producing. Yeah? Having said that, mid to long term, I think that will be very different. And as soon as the overall confidence level with this approach will have increased, I can see how the production will be impacted. And when I say impacted, I mean this in a very positive way, yeah? Because finally, we will be able to come to a very speedy delivery of individualized or at least segmented production of all sorts of digital assets at a global scale, which is what we are looking for, right? So let me close my thoughts here by saying what is really needed to get there. And I don't think from a production perspective only it's so difficult. Yeah? What we will need is all the various modules lined up for the core messages, the core claims, the core references, the core visuals, and all of that. Then you will need to have your templates ready that are deploying them through the different channels and that are creating these different assets. Yeah? And this can then go for approval. And the trickiest piece here, and as I mentioned already, will be the business rules, I guess. However, also to say that you guys from Indegene have taken us a long way to moderating this process and really documenting the way we were debating content and modules. And while documenting this, in the end, 80% of the business rules are already available, and then you use it, you refine it, you reshape it, and then you will be there. So let me summarize. Short term, I don't see a lot of change. Midterm, I can see that our traditional approach will get much more accelerated because we are getting more templatized and all that. And finally, and I think that's a little bit of a question mark still, I can't see why production, when every pieces of this puzzle tie together nicely, that we will need production at all anymore, because it will be pre-configured, pre-coded, all the pieces will fit together. And as we have then this composite asset available, we push the button and it can be taken live. Yeah? So that would be my vision which is probably a little concerning for you guys in Indegene, but it will take us still some years. But that's certainly the vision I can have here.
No, we know our business is changing there as well. Cecil, you are there, what Michael describes as midterm. Do you have a line of sight, or it comes beyond, or what are you tackling right now?
To be honest, I felt like there are so much things I wanted to jump in.
Okay, go.
maybe a couple of things, because I wasn't really clear, what business rules you were mentioning, so I was holding back. But in our world, business rules are, like, what are some of the rules that apply, on your modular content so that it can properly produce in a way that is trusted, having confidence, for MLR, medical, legal, regulatory, that your content is used appropriately. So I don't know whether that's exactly what you're thinking, or is it something else, because business rules can also be more determining on the AI ML side. It's a different term. So,
this is what I meant, yeah.
That's what you mean? Okay. So if that's the case, that is definitely a hard nut to crack. And we certainly have, I personally studied a lot, on the business rules, of all these different claims and different content. And I do find they varied a lot across different brands, and also like with the, on that. But one thing that we can do is that we can find themes that's coming out from these business rules, and using those themes, we can turn them into a intelligent way, and leveraging technology to assure that those things are being applied. I'll use an example. So let's say if I have module A, and then if the business rule is that if you're going to use this module A, then module B always needs to be used with module A. Currently, they're writing it on a text box. So just to anticipate a qualified personnel to read it and apply it. But then it's very difficult. So why not turn it into a technology that you can particularly link to the different module, the module B, so that when you're building a tactic in an automated way, that module B will always be pulled in, right? So those types of technology thing that we can leverage will reduce the need to write like free text business rules, to do that. And that's a bit of the design work, but I think that type of work goes a long way because it reduces the need to write a lot of business rules, leveraging metadata and leveraging, leveraging the technology to assure that confidently the tactic is going to be built according to the business rules. Yeah.
Machine readable business rules, not human readable.
Yes, that's right.
And Mark, if I could just add one thing, because I think it builds off of what Michael and Cecil were stating as well. I think the other piece is, and Michael, you said this, the production model is going to change drastically. And we were working with our partners really to say it's less about production and it's how is the content organization, I'm using that loosely because it's internal and external, how that needs to evolve. And as technology comes into play, that absolutely plays a role. In theory, this will reduce a significant amount of work and effort on your agencies as well, right? And you will have content experts. We call them content stewards, by the way, and assemblers. It is a different role. It is a different mindset. And they know the metadata, they know and can QA the business roles, right? We don't necessarily want them to be the business roles. So I think there's going to be, that's where that whole production model is going to change drastically, especially as you start to templatize and have global templates at scale.
Oh, very good. There's a practical question, Cecil, before I shift gears here a little bit. Somebody asked about content reuse. What changes in content reuse have you seen when you move from your traditional to an automated content approach?
Okay, so content reuse. This is a big term to me. There's different levels and layers of dimensions. So from a traditional way of measuring content reuse, generally we're looking at, are we reusing the final deliverable, kind of your final tactic, how, and then we measure it to see, have you really reused it, to produce a new content. And another way of looking at it is across geographies. right, is if your global organization produce something like this, is your local affiliates, your countries are using those types of content. We're measuring that way. But I think as we're moving towards modular way of creating content, the measurement of content reuse is much more accurate because we're measuring how the actual modules that are being used across your deliverables. So either it would be tactics across different channels, or you can use it globally as well. So is it a global module being used locally? And one of the key thing is it's much easier to use modular content than the actual tactic itself, than the actual final deliverable. So as we're moving towards creating content in a modular way, content reuse measurement is much more accurate, and it's much more improved as well, because reusing in a modular ways is much easier in using than the final deliverable. Yeah, does that answer your question? Sorry.
No, this is actually better than the simple answer that I asked. So this is really good. No, it's because you say just using the same email over and over again, even in different countries, is very hard. But using the core of what the message is in and putting into context is a lot easier reuse, not more useful for customer experience as well. And you get better measurement, as you said.
Exactly. I like that. What Parker was saying, right? Like what's the message that we want to say over here? It's the email is just a vehicle. It's the message that is important that we can reuse.
Audience question for the panel. Are agencies and the brand teams ready to create modules? How ready are they to create modules, especially considering machine readable business rules? Is there some heavy lift to do on the front end as well? I see some smiles, thoughts, head shaking. Any comments on that question?
Huge lift, right? Even, and again, we've only done it at a small scale as we were, putting it into practice. And it's against the agencies in the way that they're structured and the way that they've executed for years and years and years. So they're not ready. We're pushing them more than they're pushing us. So it's a huge lift.
Yeah, and I don't know how many of you have been using this term about the role of the marketer in the future, or the modern marketer, all of that kind of stuff. It's funny that in creating the modern marketer, we're also creating the modern agency and the modern MLR reviewer and the modern, production house and the modern, everything, so on and so on. I think you definitely have to be aware and think through how you're changing everybody that's supporting content, not just the marketer. And oftentimes I find in the sort of multiple organizations where I feel like I've had this conversation, you also have to think about those and the actors involved at each step along the way, because the needs of the marketer are different than the needs of the agency, are different than the needs of the production house. And, even from who's using which system and what, and who do we put the burden on of technology expertise and so on. So there's a lot of ways to really crack this nut, I suppose. And I think if you're in charge of leading this for your organization, this is one of those key considerations, because the needs are different for each stakeholder involved.
I think, sorry, go ahead, Tara.
Oh, sorry. No, Parker, I was just going to say, couldn't agree more, right? Because again, you can't do one thing in one organization and uplift it and drop it into another, right? Culturally, they're different. The roles are different. The mindset is different. So it's not a plug and play model and approach either. Concepts are, right? But how that gets pulled through is going to be very different from company to company.
So this is actually a perfect segue for the discussion, because we talked about a content supply chain, but being able to personalize at scale with automation has impact on the entire commercial ecosystem. Tara, what impact do you see on an organization that's able to actually do this? And we talk about agency brand teams. What do you see it evolving into? Because that's what people's jobs will change.
So I think we just alluded a little bit to it, right? Based on what we were just talking about in the prior discussion. And again, I think you'll see nuances across companies. Some agencies are doing this, but I think you're going to find that they're being far more strategic, right, around brand strategy and core messaging and I'll say global branding, and potentially less on content, right? I think you're going to start to see the need for specialization in content creation the creation of modular content. Again, it could be how production houses evolve. Could be. They haven't yet, but or companies may bring that in-house because, again, that is what is core to who they are. The challenge I think pharma would have if they do that is how do you grow and develop that talent, right? If you think about the supply chain end to end, marketers are struggling today, especially with organizations that have set up COEs or hubs or whatnot, right? Because many of them come from the field, they're learning marketing, and they have a big project management aspect to what they do. And again, when you shift organizations and operating models, then it becomes, some of what Parker was referring to earlier. What do I do if this happens? What am I going to evolve into? So I think you have to really think about what's in it for the different roles, as you're also defining what that should and could look like. And again, I think it's going to vary drastically from company to company. Then when you look at our legal and medical colleagues, ours were very receptive conceptually because of the load and the volume and the amount of content. When you got to the mechanics and the actual reviews, it's very hard to have them hold true to say, listen, a module is a module and it shouldn't have to change unless there's a data change. And when it would come back, they would try and change. That can be very costly and actually be counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish. So I think there's a lot that will change and a lot that is impacted as a result of everything that we're talking about here.
I think I'd like to go on Tara and also Michael earlier comment that putting it together, I find marketer can play a really crucial role on the content planning and strategy side of things.
That's right.
And especially they understand the whole scheme of modular content creation, driving personalization. But for them, I find if they can understanding the data that's coming in, for them to understand how content are being effective in the market, what are the customers segments are engaging in different type of content, they can plan and then set the strategy, for that. And I find the marketers are doing really well as they're thinking more strategically, in that sense, and it really set the whole chain reaction of content delivery.
Yeah, I'll just build on that. I think it's a great point because it's almost like one of the sort of aha moments we had in coming up with an operational model was the fact that modular content and really the messaging that will drive modules actually comes from a customer journey, which should be completely channel agnostic. And I think prior to sort of stumbling on that, which was truly like stumbling upon it when we learned it, the customer journey was, for all intents and purposes, very much a theoretical exercise. It was almost difficult to connect to, okay, well, I did this, so now how do I take it to like content planning? Well, the fact that we could sort of connect one together, it became very simple to go, here's the journey I want to take you on, or I recognize that you need to go on, which then leads into this sort of message clustering, which allows me to figure out how to sort of piece all of this together, which can then very easily become much more of like a plug and play approach to a content plan that you then develop over the next X number of months, where you can reuse over and over again. So I think even, I appreciate Michael's comment earlier around the back half or sort of the production end of this, but there's a significant amount of connection that can take theory and turn it into practical operation if you can connect a lot of these dots. And it's not easy to do in a world where your marketer doesn't even want to look at the data oftentimes that they said they wanted to see. So, how you get somebody to build in and buy into the belief in that takes a while in your organization. And I come from as a marketer, so I'm not throwing any shade on all marketers.
But Parker, do you see the role of the marketer and maybe the role of the operations team, which is a question I had, and it came as an audience question as well. The role of the marketer change, or the division of labor between operations and marketing, how is that going to evolve? Going to have less marketers, more operations people, same, different roles?
Well, it's dependent by company, right? It's probably also dependent by which region you work in. In the US, there's so many more resources oftentimes than what we see in other markets. So, that's probably, that may be a cop out of an answer, Mark, but that's probably the first answer. But yeah, I think it's just going to require that modern marketer evolution to sort of speed up, and the for marketers who love marketing, I think when they click into all of this and a company's got it figured out from an operations, I think a marketer who loves marketing will love this, which would give them a slight marketing operations feel. If you're a strategic marketer, you may play in a certain area of this, but not want all of it. If you're more of an operational marketer, you may want to kind of steer away from the sort of strategic, but say, okay, look, when you guys figure that out, pass it off to me and I'm going to run with it. So it might only divide or create a bigger divide in the sort of like, what would you call them? Like the realms of marketing, I guess. Not so much getting into operations necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, so marketing will become more strategic and operations will adopt some of the marketing operational aspects. I think that makes a lot of sense, particularly since the marketing operational aspects are much less brand dependent when you think about it, right? So yeah, Tara, I know you've got some experience with it too, or if anybody else you want to chime in.
No, I was just going to say it's happening in some companies already. And again, it goes back to Parker's point of how those organizations are looking at this and structuring. So I think it's just going to be a constant evolution. And again, the culture of the company and what they think sits where becomes a big piece of that too.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, one more thing. Sorry, and I'll make
sure. No, go ahead.
Like even, a good point here is like, look outside of pharma at a marketer. Mm-hmm. And how many of them actually use Adobe like themselves in the marketing role? Or and imagine asking your pharma marketer to work in Adobe Experience Manager and the reception we get, right? Like, maybe some of us are doing this, but we're not. And the couple of companies that I've worked for, we're not. But do we get there someday? I don't know. Some marketers would say, yes, give it to me. Many others would say, no way. And I'll find another place to do my job. But this is the scale and spectrum of what a marketer is so, one, it's very different at pharma, but two, it can be so wide as well. So it'll be interesting to kind of watch this play out for the next decade.
So Cecil, how is it playing out for you guys? Since this is a pertinent question.
Well, I was thinking, as we're building our ecosystem, are we also making it easier to use as well? Obviously, first we wanted to meet regulatory requirements, legal requirements, and all that important. But then we also need to think about our user going to use the system. We want to make it easy. And so because the concept is already hard, right? Because like they're so used to the traditional way of creating content. Mm-hmm. So when we bring them over, they understand, they buy into the concept. We still have to have a technology that's able to make them easier. Yeah. So I would say throughout the life cycle of a content creation, marketer may not necessarily be the one who produces, well, this is just for my case anyways, that they may not be the one who will be like authoring like modular content for that, directly hands to keyboard, but we can make it easier for them to actually build an email, right? It's not that it's like, it shouldn't be that hard. And that's those are the things that maybe there are certain things that they can play around with the new system and then explore, the possibilities, and they can see potentially like a customer to see what's the content coming out, from the company. So I think we're still exploring, and I completely agree. We're also kind of shake things a little bit, but I see some marketers are very excited, in the new journey. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Cecil, I would just add, we have our field colleagues doing that now, right? In terms of having access to content. I'm sure many of you are as well. I was chuckling at Parker because we did ask marketers and their response was not very well received, by the way. It was as you would suspect, but I think it also speaks to where the organization is as a whole in terms of digitization. And I don't mean just in content. Even if I look at the journeys we've had trying to move from HR paper-based ways of working to digital ways of working, it has been very, very challenging and difficult. So I think like everything else, customer experience does matter, right? Ease of use absolutely does matter. But I think regardless of what role it is, everybody is going to have challenges as we try and evolve how they work or how they work within the supply chain of what we're talking about here.
Well, but I think it's like always in the change journey, right? You need to answer the question, what's in it for me? Yeah? Mm-hmm. and you need to have your carrot available. And if you don't know what your own carrot is, then you will fail anyhow. Yeah. But in this space, it's comparably straightforward because the whole industry is talking about more personalized content to an individual level in a quicker way. Yeah, that's all it is about. And whatever technology we can implement that helps with that will be probably easier embraced than others, right? And I can talk from an experience in BI where we have 2 years back or so implemented a platform that was templatizing the way we are producing and deploying emails and also e-details. Of course, there was a lot of training required and all that, and there are still many countries that love their bespoke way of doing this email e-detail stuff. But there are also other markets who have really understood how this can accelerate what they are doing and how it makes their life easier. And they can even bypass me as a global digital factory because in this platform, production is not needed anymore if you do it correctly, right?
That's right.
And with all these tiny little benefits, also marketers will come along and will start using it.
Great. I have so many more audience questions here, which you won't be able all to answer. I encourage the audience to use the networking tool within the platform to reach out to individual panel members. There's no vendors in this conference, so don't worry about solicitation. This is just peer-to-peer conversation here. But I want to close this panel asking each one of you just one advice, one point you want to give people on their journey toward content automation and personalization at scale, that if you can pass that on to them, they can take home from this panel. Anybody wants to give it a start?
I'll start then. I'll start. Being through in this transformation journey, I do think one thing is that there are so many people that are impacted across all the different teams. And we cannot underestimate that all these transformation that they have to go through. So understanding the new concept of modular content, and then a new completely different process to support that modular content. And then also obviously the technology. One thing is that if it's possible not to have that one time to transform everything at the same time, bring the people along in a journey so that they can start understanding the concept first, and without technology, let's say that, and then have them understand what we're trying to do in the vision, help them use examples that not even outside of the industry example too. It's okay. Just bring them along. And then when people are buy-in, then you're bringing the different levels of transformation, including the processes, the technology that people are so interested to see how to make it more efficient and more intelligent. But rather than doing it one time. That was my piece.
Great. I remember the hours of conversation we had with you and your team, Cecil. So it's also, if you like this topic, it's actually a lot of fun as well. Sorry, who's next?
I can go, Mark. I would say, I think the best advice or guidance I have is and we've used the word journey a couple of times, and I've tried to avoid the word change, right? Because in the 18 years that I've been in pharma specifically, we've never been constant at all. It's an evolution, right? So I think you need to have an evolutionary mindset. Back to what Parker, I think, was highlighting earlier, you need to assess where you are today and figure out what's going to help you advance to that place. Don't jump in and go, I'm going to modularize, because if you're not set up for it, right, there's a lot of bricks and mortar and foundation that need to be in place to even start to bring them along there. So don't jump in too far into the pool before you know that you have the foundation, and look at it as a constant evolution.
Great.
Yeah, maybe building on that, it's tough to give like a single piece of advice, maybe small like tidbits maybe, but just building on that too. Like, first of all, I hope you're good at selling, because you will absolutely have to sell this. If you don't know you're selling, I'll tell you now, you're going to have to sell it. I love what Cecil said though about one of the things you said, Cecil, remind me that like, we're all benefactors of modular content from other industries right now. We just don't realize we are. I guarantee you Coke and Nike and like you're seeing the result of modular stuff. So like, I don't, whatever you can do to help your stakeholders realize like, hey, it's new to life sciences, but it's not new in general.
That's right.
I think that's kind of maybe one of the pieces. And then maybe probably the biggest thing I think I could share with you is just don't be, hopefully many of you have already started this journey and you're sort of somewhere on it like most of us are, or like some of us are, but just give yourself some room and don't tackle too much at one time. There's enough, still go fast and push the envelope, but where you need to go a little bit slower, like I promise it's okay to go slower and get some things figured out. So, just make sure you sort of build in those moments to kind of check yourself and know which part comes next. There's going to be some complex things you need to solve for, and it's okay to set that aside and say, I'm not going to be able to solve that with my team until February, and that's all right. Like you've got plenty to do between now and then, instead of like urgently try to figure something out that wasn't going to benefit you in February anyway. So I would say just keep that in mind and give yourself that permission and space right now, because forcing it down somebody is just going to cause you to have to rework or restart or call it a failed project. And that's almost the worst thing that could happen here is if you have to put a big failure stamp on a modular project, it'll make it that much harder to resurface and rebuild or redo again. So anyway, summary, give yourself some space and some time to sort of.
Great. Michael, 30 seconds.
Mark made a brilliant point. This concept is by far not new. We were just preparing our go-to-market summit, the big annual event that we always have in the springtime. And we pulled out some concepts from Walt Disney, where you have these comic strips. And they did it in the 60s already. Imagine, like, Pooh the Bear and the Jungle Book and everything, all the same movements, just different context. Yeah. So the concept is there forever. Let's just get started with this in life science and pharma also. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. We could go on for another hour, but the room is being used for the next panel. I really, really appreciate all your insights, all the willingness to share. It's by far one of my favorite panels every year. And I'm excited to see what we have progress to next year when we touch on the content topic again. Thank you so much, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.
Thank you.